live in a culture that seems to be obsessed with money and material possessions. Despite the overwhelming evidence and the fact that we all kind of know that money and material possessions are not the answer, it's easy to be caught up in the myth that the more stuff you have, the more security and happiness you will enjoy. And while this does seem a challenge for us all, it's not specific to our day. In Matthew chapter 6, some 2,000 years ago, Jesus tackles this problem head on and in usual fashion does something amazing. He peels away the layers and deconstructs our cultural values that we can all too easily hide behind, and he penetrates right to the heart of the matter. What we see is that this isn't ultimately about treasure, this is about the shape of our discipleship and the potential division of our loyalties. We could easily think that this lesson is for someone else, people that are richer than us. But actually, Jesus is challenging us to earnestly examine our hearts and ask the question that is truly the longing of your heart. What is your life really about? What are you and I really living for? What do we desire above all things? Money can really reveal our heart. In verses 19 through 20, Jesus tells us, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moth and rust do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal." So Jesus' point here seems to be pretty straightforward. What treasure are you going to be concerned about? Things that are temporary or things that are eternal? And the word for rust here is the idea of an incessant feeding. So there's a clear inference of things being actively eaten away. So Jesus is saying that earthly treasures, be that your precious metals or your expensive clothing, all have the same destiny. They're going to end up rotting, decaying, or even just being stolen. They will inevitably be destroyed and will no longer exist or be of any value. In the ancient world, a typical household would bury their treasures under the floor of the house. So actually, when Jesus says when thieves break in, he's talking about when thieves dig through and take your stuff. We don't necessarily bury things, but we do put things away in bank accounts and saving accounts, and we may even have the illusion of being secure or permanent, but we all know they can actually be fleeting. And Jesus' point is this: earthly wealth is always precarious at best. Don't we all know that? After all this material stuff at the end of the game, it goes back in the box. Instead, Jesus says, store up treasures in heaven. Store up things that last. What might treasures in heaven look like? Undiluted, extravagant love, a sinless life, purity of heart, worship without restraint or hypocrisy. So how do we lay them up? How do we store our treasures? One way might be considered very countercultural. We revel in them now. We practice generous love. We actively work to be rid of sin. We don't do things to be noticed. We cut out distractions so that we can spend time with God. We do these types of things now, which will impact for eternity. And it will be safe, and those things won't rot, they won't rust, they can't be stolen from us. It's something that will last and have ultimate value. And Jesus pushes it further. It's not just what's silly to build up temporary things, but wherever you invest your resources, your heart will be there also. It says, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be. The word heart here is a metaphor for the center of a person's inner being. It's the center of a person's attention and commitment. It's whatever you hold dear and whatever you value. Think about it with money. Money is like a roadmap to the soul. It's like Jesus saying, if you want to really know what's in your heart, follow the money. If a stranger examined your credit card statement, what would that say to them about where and what you truly value? Where does your money go so effortlessly and joyfully that it flies out of your pockets and never feels like spending? That is where your treasure is. And Jesus is telling us that we need to relocate our treasures to what God treasures. We've got to invest our resources in what God is supremely interested in. Things like our relationship with Him, the cross of Jesus Christ, the gift of the Spirit, and the people of God, the beauty and proclamation of the true gospel, the salvation of our friends and our family, these types of things. Are these types of things your treasure? Can we honestly say that this is our heart, our first love, and our passion? So Jesus also shows us that by setting our eyes on the wrong type of treasure, like money, it can actually blind us. Verses 22 and 23 tells us the eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are good, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? This can be tricky because we don't usually think of the eyes as a lamp. Nowadays we consider the eye to be a window. However, the idea in the ancient world was that the eye was a lamp that lets light into the body. If the eye is of poor quality, then it will shed darkness. If the eye is of good quality, then it will shed light. Jesus' point is that the quality of our eyes, where we focus, has an effect. If our eye is not clearly fixed on God, then actually the whole of our life will be perverted. So in other words, if your eyes are looking to God, and therefore His treasure is your treasure, then your whole life will be filled with His light. And however, if your eyes are bad, in the same sense they spend their time eyeing and coveting the treasures of this world, then your life will end up being filled with the inevitable darkness of being captivated by everything which will pass away. Just think about how no one thinks they're rich. It's never enough. I was sitting with a friend one day and he was saying that it doesn't seem to matter how much he earns, it always seems to be spent and he never seems to be satisfied. There's a tendency to live a level or slightly above our means, and money can blind us to our lifestyle choices. Think about it. Rarely, when setting a budget, would someone figure out what is the minimum they need to spend and the maximum they can give away. No, we start with the income and just figure out how we're going to spend all of that. And when our eyes are fixed on money, it can so easily blind us to the choices we make. We think we own the money, but it actually ends up owning us. Instead, we've got to fix our eyes on God. So finally, Jesus pushes harder and He's asking the most fundamental question of all. Who will we serve? Will we serve money or will we serve God? No one can serve two masters. He will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. The scenario that Jesus is causing to come to mind here is not that of an employee and a boss, but the slave and their master. And his point here is pretty obvious. Undivided service can only be given to one master. If there's more than one master, then it means that every single choice will result in favoring one and rejecting the other. It means a split in the disciples' loyalty. That expression, to hate the one and love the other, was a common saying, and it doesn't literally mean to hate one and love the other, but it's more to make a dramatic point, that when you choose one thing, you're not choosing the other thing. Jesus is saying that you cannot serve wealth and God. You cannot have it both ways. Choosing to serve wealth is simultaneously a choice not to serve God. And this is a radical dualistic understanding of discipleship that allows for no middle ground. No fence sitting. So later on in Matthew, Jesus will say plainly, "He who is not with me is against me, and he who does not gather with me scatters." In Matthew 19, a rich young man comes to Jesus and asks what he must do to inherit eternal life, and Jesus responds that he should sell all that he owns and give it to the poor. The rich man goes away sad because he did not want to part with his wealth. It had become his God. And in some Bible versions, the word money is capitalized. That's because the original word mammon, meaning property or wealth, is being personified. It's a little bit like the way we sometimes refer to the almighty dollar, paralleling the almighty God. It's personified because it's become the thing which demands our whole life. And Jesus is making the point when it comes to identity and meaning, the human life is not self-sufficient. We might hate that idea. We love the idea that we're masters of our destiny, but Jesus is saying that simply isn't true. Humans can't help but serve something that gives greater meaning. The choice is not whether we will serve, but whom or what we will serve. So how does that work with money? Just ponder a little. Like, what are the things for you that money is so easily spent on, and why? Sometimes the way we spend money can be a substitute for God. We might be trying to maintain an image so that we have the approval of others. We might be trying to project an image so that we feel important. We might be lavishing it on other people so that we can feel loved. Whatever it might be, we can displace God's proper place in our lives and replace Him with something that is inferior, that will never satisfy. Faith family, I have a sneaking suspicion that at some level and at different times in our life, just by virtue of the culture we live in, we're going to be challenged by what treasure we choose to store up. Treasure that perishes or treasure that lasts. We're not going to get this perfect, and with all of our imperfections, we take them to the cross. We lay them there. We find forgiveness and cleansing. We get to come back to God day after day and say, God, I want to treasure you and you alone. And Jesus is clear. Store up the things that last, He says. Keep your eyes on that which God values, not what the world values. Choose this day whom you will serve. It's not possible to serve God and wealth. You can't divvy up your life like a pie and offer one slice, even if it's the biggest slice, to God. Jesus demands it all. He wants to save us from trusting in things that simply don't last. But shouldn't we let Him?